All right, and tragedy on Fort Hood. A soldier opens fire on post, killing 3 people before turning the gun on himself.
Yeah, of course, still so many questions to be answered in the coming days and weeks. We feel like we've been here before, but we don't know why. But we have learned the details of what happened. Texas Today's Chris Davis is live at Fort Hood. Chris, an absolute tragedy for our Central Texas community once again.
Yeah, just completely heartbreaking, Chris and Jane. Not only are 4 soldiers dead, but investigators here on Fort Hood say 3 of them died at the hands of the 4th, one of their fellow soldiers. Let's take a look at some of the video we shot yesterday afternoon. The response from local and federal law enforcement was just tremendous. It all started with reports of gunshots on Fort Hood around 4 yesterday afternoon. The investigation into exactly what happened is, of course, still ongoing. But here's what they've pieced together so far. A soldier with the 13th Sustainment Command Expeditionary fired shots in 2 separate buildings, administration centers for the 1st Medical Brigade and 49th Transportation Battalion. Between those 2 scenes, investigators believe he got into a vehicle, fired more shots from inside of it. He was eventually confronted by a military police officer, and after acting like he was going to surrender, the shooter reached for his .45 caliber Smith & Wesson. When the officer, quote, engaged him, he allegedly put the gun to his own head and pulled the trigger. He had allegedly shot 19 people before shooting himself. 3 of those died, and 16 more were taken to both Darnell Army Medical Center and Scott & White over in Temple. It's unclear right now if he knew any of the victims. As of last night, 3 of those patients at Scott & White remained on ventilators in critical condition. A representative for the hospital told reporters they're all doing about as well as can be expected. All of the victims are soldiers, and some of them got to the hospital still wearing their uniforms.
Providing attention to the families, trying to give them as much support as they need to help them through this. And we've had a lot of our volunteer staff come in to help us through this.
Our focus now is to focus on the families of the injured and focus on the families of the killed. Ensure that they have the best care and counseling available.
Now, as for the shooter, sources say he's 34-year-old Ivan Lopez. He's a specialist. He was married and had a family. Lopez served 4 months in Iraq back in 2011 and just recently transferred here to Fort Hood from another Texas military installation. Army records don't show he was wounded in combat, but he did self-report a traumatic brain injury. He was being treated for mental health issues, including depression and anxiety, and he was going through the long diagnosis process for PTSD, but he hadn't been officially diagnosed with that disorder. Now, the gun he allegedly used was not registered on Fort Hood, which is required for anyone carrying a personal weapon on post. Now, right now, there's no indication that this had anything to do with terrorism, but that's not something investigators can rule out entirely at this point, and Milley did not want to speak to any sort of premeditation. Now, again, this investigation is still in the very early stages, obviously. It's going to take a while to get to the bottom of exactly what happened and hopefully why the alleged shooter did what he did. And we do expect some more information to come along, both from Fort Hood and from Scott & White, as to the condition of some of those patients who were taken to the hospital and went into surgery yesterday afternoon and into the evening. We expect some of that information coming up later this morning and then again later on into the day. And of course, we'll bring you all of that information as soon as we get it here on KCEN and on KCENTV.com. Chris and Jane, back to you.
All right, Chris Davis reporting for us out in front of the Bernie Beck gate on the post there on the front of Fort Hood. Now, Jane, one of my favorite things to do, I can't speak for you, but hosting this morning show is waking up and trying to put a smile on people's faces in the morning and really get their day going off to hopefully a positive start. And we apologize. This morning is not one of those mornings. I mean, we are immersed in tragedy, and it feels like we're going through this over and over again. We had West a year ago this month. Then we had the Fort Hood shooting, the first one back in 2009. Now we're revisiting it again here in 2014.
Yeah, it seems many tragic events have happened recently, and we're trying to get that information out to people as soon as we know it, of course. And as soon as we heard the shots fired yesterday in Fort Hood, it was hard to not think about back in November 5th of 2009.
Yeah, not that long ago at all. The entire Central Texas community and the world really feared for the worst that day. Texas Today's Matt Reed joins us now. And Matt, people were desperately trying to get a hold of loved ones back then as well as yesterday.
Yeah, Jane and Chris, that was really priority number 1 for the families on post and off post, trying to get a hold of their loved ones. And in 2014, we do that by getting out our cell phones, They were calling, Facebooking, tweeting, emailing, basically anything you could imagine to try to make sure that their loved ones were safe. Now, also people started taking photos and videos of what they were seeing. We received several videos to our KCN Facebook page into our email. In a lot of them, you could hear the speakers on Fort Hood telling people to take shelter and to stay safe. In one of them, you also saw soldiers taking a defensive position. As early reports indicated that there was a second shooter, we now know that there was only one shooter, 34-year-old specialist Ivan Lopez, who killed himself with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but not before killing 3 others and injuring 16 and terrorizing countless lives on and off of Fort Hood.
Soldiers from the Infield Academy that heard gunshots, they walked over to check it out. They saw other soldiers jumping the fences and were told to get back because there were 3 soldiers that had already been shot. And that was all they were told, and then they left the area.
It's really unreal, really unreal, because in 2009 I was here, and this thing happened again, and it's unbelievable.
As a mom, to not be able to get to your kids in a situation of crisis, yeah, it's tearing me up inside. And all I want to do is get on base, but they won't let us.
A lot of parents yesterday, they were trying to get to their kids, but because Fort Hood was on lockdown, that was just not possible. Those students were being treated and taken care of by teachers in the meantime. Once parents were able to get to their kids, there were definitely some very long hugs. Now, coming up later on Texas Today, you're actually going to hear from a neighbor of Specialist Ivan Lopez and how she says she didn't see any of this coming. Jane and Chris, back to you.
Wow.
All right, Matt Reed reporting live for us on Fort Hood. Yeah, talking about the schools and everything, I'm sure parents were worried sick about their children.
Yeah, good
Absolutely.
report from Matt, because you can imagine you're doing your normal schedule, school's out at 3:30ish, and you're thinking, now I'm going to go get the kids, and all of a sudden you can't for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah.
At some level, the anxiety goes up and beyond, because you're really thinking, I just need to see my kid and make sure they're fine. They're probably fine, but I just need that reassurance.
Absolutely, really tough for those parents, of course. And we do want to mention this morning that Killeen ISD will be open.
Yeah, we want to stress how safe it is, of course, for the kids. Yesterday, parents had a difficult time reaching their students, as Matt just told us. We spoke to Killeen ISD's deputy superintendent. This is what he told us.
We really want to make sure that our thoughts and prayers are with those that have been impacted by this tragic event. We also want to provide accolades to all those that have helped us, particularly with the communication. Our YMCA after-school program performed phenomenally, as well as our campus staffs that were at our campuses that helped in assisting with the communication throughout the evening of this event. Fort Hood performed wonderfully in the communication as well. We'd also like to thank them for their efforts.
And also, we want to mention physical training for soldiers has been canceled this morning. All soldiers are to report at 10 a.m. DA civilians are to report at their normal time, and contractors should contact their employer for their report time.
Yeah, and a few more notes here. Family counseling centers have been set up off of post. You can attend starting at 9 a.m. The locations are the Spirit of Fort Hood Chapel and Scott and White Hospital. You can also call 254-287-CHAP. That's 287-2427. And soldiers or family members of soldiers, if you need assistance, you're being asked to please call 254-288-7570 or take advantage of that 1-800 number, 866-836-2751.
And new this morning, Temple police are searching for a suspect that opened fire at a convenience store last night, shooting 2 people and killing another. Police got the call at around 11:35 at the Pool Grocery in Temple on the 1700 block on 1st Street. The suspect was attempting to rob that store when he shot 2 people. One person was pronounced dead at the scene. The other was taken to Scott and White with a life-threatening injury to the upper chest and shoulder area. Now, the suspect is being described as being a black male with a stocky build with long braided hair and wearing a flat brim ball cap. If you have any information on this shooting, you're asked to contact police. Well, your time now is 6:12, and we'll, of course, continue to bring you updates on Fort Hood. But first, meteorologist Patrick Crawford will have a look at your Thursday forecast.
Yeah, we normally play a lot of music in the morning to get you going. It does not feel like one of those days. Out of respect to those injured and killed, we are going to have a little bit more of a somber feeling this morning. Here's some of the pictures and photographs that were captured yesterday during the terrible events.
This is Texas Today with Chris Radcliffe. Jane Lonsdale, and weather with meteorologist Patrick Crawford. KCEN HD News, first in high definition.